The next factor we'll discuss are economic forces. The economic environment, or economy, refers to the income, expenditures, and resources that affect running a business or household. So in effect, the way firms and the whole economy use resources. This environment is affected by the interactions of all the elements in the macroeconomic system. So we're impacted by income distribution, what's the GDP and how's it changing, price changes, inflation and deflation, whether we're in a recession, employment rate, exchange rates. All these examples are factors that may influence consumers and how you may run your business, whether directly or impacting another stakeholder. After all, money is a major function of how we make exchanges happen. So a major economic force we focus on is at the consumer level. How much money do they actually have to spend? While gross income is the total amount they earn, disposable and discretionary income may matter a great deal more depending if they see your product as a necessity or a luxury. Purchasing power is the customer's actual ability to make a purchase. It is another way we can consider what consumers actually have to spend. Purchasing power is a comparison of income versus the relative cost of a proverbial set standard of goods and services in a different geographic area. So how far does your dollar go? And keep in mind, something else that we have to remember is consumer perceptions. A lot of this is based on their perceptions of their income as well. How much do they perceive that the amount gives them? So in sum, many of the macro forces ultimately influence what customers have and feel they have to spend. This influences what type of purchases and investments they actually make. Next section, technology. This is the application of science to convert an economy's resources to output, to practical purposes. So effectively, applied science of engineering or engineering research. The technological environment affects how we do things and what we can do. So keep in mind, it is not just electronic developments. Technology includes instead both products and processes of all sorts. It can be as simple as figuring out a newer way to wrap a burrito or, say, fold paper cardboard into a little spoon. Good for food samples at Costco or half marathons here. It can be how we can do emailed receipts versus a paper receipt. We can send text messages to people waiting for a table at a restaurant, and now customers feel free to roam the neighboring retailers while they wait. Fireworks companies figure out new ways to make different cool shapes and color patterns, and we're seeing lighted drones now. Here's an example of a process. Blockchains, distributed ledgers where it's easier to trace and secure a supply chain record. Very helpful if you've got something like a food recall you've got to manage. So let's take a look at these examples. Quick thinking activity. Take a look. So what type of products might be replaced by these new inventions? So we can see Nest Smart Home Tech, Slack communication platform, and solar photovoltaic fabrics. So basically solar panel fabrics. What type of products might be replaced by these new inventions? What new cultural norms may follow based on our assumption that these products now exist? What tech or other conditions may be needed before they will be ready, or rather, if you're a competitor, when they'll be at your throat? What's stopping them from destroying your product market right now if you happen to be a competitor for this group? Okay, technological environment, privacy ethics. So quick example of how new technology brings new ways of business. So many companies make their living connecting consumers to other companies. Search engine and social media sites need consumers, the users, to create value. So their search patterns are used to optimize the system. And their posts make it worth it for their friends to come to the site. And in general, all this consumer use makes it so that it's a site worthy of advertisers to pay for ads. So here's an example of a satiric cartoon commenting on how social media sites and others must balance the desire of many stakeholders from a consumer perspective. So as they say, Facebook and you, if you're not paying for it, you're not the customer, you're the product being sold. So on the one hand, they attend to the needs of their users. On the other hand, they still need to attend to the needs of the companies that actually pay them. So Cambridge Analytica is one example of how organizations must balance the needs of many stakeholders. More recent news has us talking content moderation policy and how to help different user groups and communities at large. So next is the competitive environment. So the competitive environment reflects the structure and ways in which you are, well, competition. It asks questions like, what's your competition like? How many? What is their size? What is their relative power compared to you and to each other? Can you each carve out a little cave out for yourself, or is your industry very interdependent? How fierce is competition? Are customers fiercely loyal to a provider, and how so? Is it to a location, to a service personnel, and the brand? So here's an example. Donut shops may realize that there are plenty of customers who will go to whatever shop is closest. All they have to do is make sure they locate far enough away from each other, so they do not have to compete too intensely. However, others will find they must compete with everyone nearby by nature of where they are, such as a restaurant in a busy plaza. Then again, they still try to be careful not be too directly related to each other. So in this example, small shop Rainbow Donuts was very concerned when it was reported Dunkin' Donuts was coming to the exact same shopping center by way of the shopping center ownership. In sum, the way you're competing determines what types of actions you can do and how you can anticipate competitors might respond to your actions. And remember, it's key to evaluate competition according to the benefits they provide. So you can't just say, okay, I'm only looking at donut shops, or I'm only looking at specific product we offer. You gotta look at the need set. So third-party access to a single vehicle, transportation. So car companies do not only have to look at other car companies, they need to be aware of the needs of their segment. So some customers effectively love the feeling of driving or feelings of independence. Others don't care about that, they just need to get to somewhere. So current temporary transportation services like taxis and vans, for example, aren't the only type of competitor with effectively the need set. You can see how these need sets, they all seem to be vehicles, but they're different types, but they compete in overlapping ways. So taxis, Uber, and Lyft are a particular type of competitive group. Zip cars, car sharing. This one is Waymo, Google's self-driving cars. All of these will influence their business models. And so they have similar things, but differences in others. Here's another example. Skateboard companies, when considering competitors for their products that cater to students who want to get around campus. So not necessarily those who do tricks or acrobatics, they might consider bikes, scooters, motorized skateboards, motorized scooters, just plain walking, and so on. So again, it's the matter of what do your customers need and how you're competing. One thing we will learn in later chapters is how much firms usually aim to differentiate so they don't have to compete too intensely. If you are considered the one and only for enough people in terms of their needs satisfaction, you are a lot safer than if you're considered one of many companies that they can pick. So as an activity, draw up competitors for two product types and the ways they compete. And don't just think in terms of that strict product. Rainbow and Dunkin', for example, also compete against, say, McDonald's or a 7-Eleven for someone looking for a quick morning sugar fix. Next is the legal environment, which refers to the rules and laws that set standards for conduct that are enforced by legal power. They can encourage what can be produced, sold, and advertised, and they're often aimed at groups like customers or firms. Something to remember, though, is that laws and ethics aren't always perfectly aligned. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So why? Well, it takes time to enact laws. There are different rule-making bodies, and, well, not everyone's always going to agree on the laws. There's different publics involved. So thus, we see laws vary across different people and places. So alcohol still has a patchwork of laws in when and where you could buy it. Some counties are completely dry. Next, laws are made. So they don't just come from nowhere. There are different people and interests behind or against different types of laws. For example, all types of publics, individuals, firms, industries, etc., may lobby for regulation or the repeal of certain regulations. So we have the stories of taxi services and ride-sharing firms at odds with what types of regulations each should be bound to. More recently, the ride-sharing services put through a proposition in California. Copyright holders banded together on an EU case that left users, UGC makers, and organizations scrambling. So keep in mind, laws are always a little delayed. The norms and values of society may be different. So just because something is legal does not mean it is accepted. Just because something is illegal does not mean it will always be. So look toward those upcoming trends. So here's an example of a good transition to self-regulation, speaking of, not just assuming what is legal. So I'd like you to discuss and reflect. Why might we see self-regulation? Who or when is this more likely? Go ahead, think about it. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to think about why we might see self-regulation. So hallmark, other factors determine likelihood and type of legal environment. Are you a problem that's more likely to cause fear or concern? Are you too complex to understand such that people ignore, or are you too complex such as a different narrative takes hold? So many firms and industries choose to self-regulate. This can be both beneficial to the firms by protecting the good name of their industry and preventing less nuanced regulations to be passed. And of course, the idea is this can be good for consumers. So for example, we have orgs like the Better Business Bureau. Video games, movie, and music producers all sought out legitimacy by posting ratings to their works. Many individual firms or industries will purposely also change conduct. We have examples of firms willingly passing more strict privacy policies. We also see industries that may even encourage safe practices from users and manufacturers alike to protect the practice. So the know before you fly organizations aim to encourage safe practices among both users and producers of unmanned aerial vehicles, so drones. In fact, they even encourage some legislation as a way to protect against more extreme measures. Notably, most of these are always voluntary, as the book reminds us, too strong, and they may run afoul of Robinson Patman. Here's a classic example of regulation for consumer protection. The government, specifically the FTC, started looking at apps designed for kids because parents were quickly learning how easily kids could buy things with real money without their approval. There were reports of kids spending $600, $700, even $1,400 on in-app purchases like these lovely named Smurf berries. Apple came to a $32.5 million settlement. Previously, the FTC also had found Amazon had broken the law and must pay back its users. The companies are likewise expected to put stronger protections. As you can imagine, this little warning sign from the Smurf village app maker is not likely to cut it. So this is also likely the reason why when looking at the purchase more screen for say something like Putt Putt, a kid's game, they have the user calculate 3 math problems that use Roman numerals before taking you to any purchase screen. So in sum, just an example that self-regulation only goes so far. Other agencies often continue to step in and monitor things. So what now? Well, laws can create new norms. So it's important to remember that when we have laws, they do create new norms. So the new healthcare law, or not so new anymore, influences how many can get healthcare. Likewise, there's a lot of pressure on, say, firearm shops by certain segments of the firearm market to not carry smart guns, biometric guns, and all those types of things that only fire if they're unlocked with an authorized fingerprint. Unless it makes smart guns more common versus regular guns, or that certain gun control legislation kicks in. So going forward, it's important to be proactive. Do not let what is currently legal or illegal guide your decisions, but instead, what are the trending ethical perspectives? Or at least don't just do what's legal and illegal. Do follow the laws here, okay? But you have to see what is legal and ethical. So, for example, states vary in how quickly they've made laws on testing and use of self-driving cars. Doesn't mean you can just ignore it. Another is Facebook's newsfeed experiment. They altered the newsfeed to see how consumers posted. All perfectly legal, even if many users at the time were unnerved. Finally, there aren't many laws for how or what firms can put in terms and conditions for users. And so the organization Terms of Service didn't read seeks to challenge this by pushing against current terms of service writing practices. So in sum, remember, the existing laws are only part of our regulatory environment. You need to look at the regulatory policy and sense societal shifts to better manage this environment. One additional environmental factor I would like to discuss is the natural environment. It refers to factors from the natural environment such as climate, weather, and natural resources. This often gets rolled into other factors because their force may be felt by those other factors. For example, oil is a finite, non-renewable resource. There's only so much left to harvest, and it's not going to reform in time for us to use it again. So we can feel its impact by how oil prices impact costs or the way there are regulations meant to manage these resources. Maybe things like rare earth metals are similar with electronics and policy and recycling and all that. However, while you can roll these into other categories, I still find there are situations where categorizing as natural, such as the propensity for a place to have brush fires in hilly regions of dry California, may be more succinct at expressing why there must be higher insurance costs. There are other impacts how you may execute your marketing plans and all that stuff. So in sum, the natural environment reflects the ways we must directly assess the natural environment and natural resources on our business. And they certainly often have an impact on other environments as well, so knowing one part helps you predict how other environments come into play. So here's a natural environment example. There's an episode of the preschool series called Peppa Pig that is banned in Australia. So think about it. What do you think is banned? Okay, so in it, Peppa Pig learns spiders can be friendly. But in Australia, many spiders are not your friend. Many spiders in Australia have a venomous bite, in fact, that can seriously harm or kill a preschooler. Thus, the TV broadcaster decided to no longer air that episode. Again, I stress that the natural environment can also have a major impact on other external factors such as the cultural and regulatory environments, and after all, they are also looking at their own external environments when making decisions. The people amongst these environments are likewise activated due to the common environmental element of having tons of deadly spiders in Australia. As a way to draw us, as a way to draw us back from Australia to the US, you can recognize how the California drought may be impacting consumers and businesses alike. Consider what other factors might be influencing your product. And one more thing, on a media literacy note, make sure you check your sources and those details. And know that even reputable sources do have typos or minor errors sometimes. When looking for citations, I noticed that articles frequently use 2 different episode titles for that spider episode. My experience as a parent meant I knew there are in fact 2 separate spider episodes on Peppa Pig, one called The Spider's Web and the other Mr. Skinny Legs. Both feature Peppa learning about spiders and with the lesson that they can be helpful and friendly. The ABC network notice never listed the episode title, and all later articles get mixed up on which one was actually banned. It probably doesn't help that the spider's also called Mr. Skinny Legs in both. In case you're curious, the episode is likely The Spider's Web, given the Australian sources tend to use that title and show images and plot lines of it, not the other episodes that other sources use. However, we can recognize this is always an educated guess and that the best part is not just relying on a Google search and LexisNexis, but you have legitimate inquiries to official sources that you can do if you really need to. So with that, the last activity to wrap this up is see for yourself. This will be definitely helpful if for your product announcement, but what you want to do is remember, you're not just making a marketing plan for any old reason. You believe there's something about that external environment that means there is a threat to get ahead of or a grand opportunity you are poised to take advantage of. So I invite you to go try this activity out. Just go for an idea or product or industry, brainstorm them out. Get a big piece of paper, a whiteboard, just write it all out and see what you have. So here are your learning objectives, again, to help you digest what we just spoke about. Ultimately, you will want to be able to discuss how environmental forces inform your strategy, and in this and the next slide deck, discuss how might the environmental forces impact especially ethical decisions. So feel free to reach out with any questions you may have and let me know. llouis@laverne.edu. Take care, and whatever ideas you have, run with them, see where they lead you, and have fun.